Thank you very much, and good afternoon, conference. We're breaking out into standing ovations, and our key speaker hasn't spoken yet, so that's a great sign for the session we're going to have. So we're moving on this afternoon to the Justice and Home Affairs debate. We will also be coming back to the votes that were deferred from this morning, and we hope to be able to bring some more clarity to delegates as to how those will proceed. And we will also be discussing the first motion from Women's Conference. So you've already given a very warm welcome, but please can I invite you to once again welcome our first speaker, the Shadow Home Secretary, Diane Abbott.
Good afternoon, conference. Warm socialist greetings to delegates, members, observers, and those of you watching this conference at home. Firstly, I'd like to thank my wonderful Shadow Home Affairs team of junior ministers. They are fantastic. We live in extraordinary times. In Boris Johnson, we have a Prime Minister who wasn't elected by the public, has yet to win a vote in Parliament, has no majority, has no support for his signature policy of crashing out of the EU without a deal, and Boris Johnson's own brother has resigned from his cabinet. This must be the first ever ministerial resignation in order to spend less time with your family. But we live in extraordinarily serious times. Violent crime is rising, there's a crisis of policing, a government in chaos over immigration policy. And this entire conference knows that crashing out of the EU without a deal would be a disaster for this country that it would take years to recover from. And you always have to remember that no deal is a Boris Johnson project on behalf of Donald Trump. We would be subordinate to a United States currently led by one of the most right-wing presidents of modern times. And the danger would be no action on climate change, more wars, a sell-off of all our public services like the NHS, and the Americanization of working conditions. As the government's own documents tell us, no deal could create civil unrest, public disorder, and undermine our ability to tackle crime and terrorism. International crime is rising, but with a no-deal Brexit, it would mean we'd lose the European arrest warrant, we'd lose real-time access to important Europe-wide databases on criminals, terrorists, and justice and security cooperation would be threatened. Nobody who takes the security of this country seriously can support a no-deal Brexit. By contrast, Labour will defend the safety and security of all our citizens. And that includes job security, a secure home, safe streets, security from international crime. The Tories have failed on all these fronts. Just ask the victims of violent crime and the people who watched their neighbours burned to death in the Grenfell Tower tragedy. Even Tory ministers now admit that there's a crisis of rising crime and that police cuts have contributed. The Tories are promising to recruit more police now, but Boris Johnson and the others did nothing to stop the 20,000 cuts to police officers the Tories have made since 2010. And let's not forget the Lib Dems. They would rather the public didn't remember that their leader was in the cabinet when most of these police cuts were made, and the cuts to the NHS, and the cuts to welfare. There's no question that cuts in police numbers have contributed to the rise in crime. But there are other things that have contributed. The cuts in education, the increase in school exclusions, the zero-hour contracts, all the homelessness and inequality, all the cuts in the mental health services. These have also played their part, and they are all Tory policies. So when they say they will lead the fight against crime, do not believe a word of it. They are the ones who have created the conditions for rising serious and violent crime. Senior police officers are increasingly going on the record and saying that cuts to public services have created an environment where crime flourishes. And cuts have consequences. You cannot keep people safe and secure on the cheap. Labour in government will address the ravages of austerity. It is well known that we've already committed to recruiting thousands of extra police officers. We will recruit thousands of real police officers to the front line. But for all the Tory big talk about recruiting more police officers, the Tories seem to be relying on taking people out of police administration and putting them in a uniform. Unlike this government, we aren't encouraging more school exclusions. Children should be in school. Otherwise, they will be schooled by gangs. We will tackle mental health care, underfunding and inequalities. We'll build the new homes and outlaw zero-hours contracts. We will tackle the causes of crime. And when I travel up and down the country, talking to people about their concerns about crime and public order, they often express their concern about the cuts to the youth service. Labour is listening. Soon, we will be announcing details of an entirely new youth service to address the issues of educational exclusion, the lack of role models, inequality and deprivation amongst our young people. And my brilliant colleague, Shadow Minister Kat Smith, will be leading on this. The Tories are insulting our intelligence if they think the public will simply forget who has caused this crisis of law and order. They insult us too with their election platform. They think that they can win votes with dog whistle racism led by Boris Johnson, a man who described veiled Muslim women as letterboxes or bank robbers. And he has yet to apologise for this. The Tories' rhetoric on immigration is just as false as it is on law and order. They promised to cut net migration to 100,000 a year. They lied. It never happened. They claimed international graduates should leave the country because they were overstaying. They have had to reverse that position. They said that they would end the hostile environment and end the scandal of Windrush. They have emphatically not ended the sufferings of the victims of Windrush. They said they would treat the 3 million EU migrants in this country fairly. They have not done so, and the situation of EU migrants is a Windrush scandal in the making. We will end the Windrush scandal, we will ensure justice for Grenfell, and we will uphold all the rights of the EU 3 million. We will tackle the scourge of knife crime and the underlying causes of crime. We will repeal the 2014 Immigration Act and end the Tory hostile environment. Election after election, Tories weaponise immigration. They weaponise anti-foreigner sentiment, and they use coded and uncoded racism to distract from their attacks on the livelihoods and living standards of ordinary working people. But Labour, under Jeremy Corbyn, will not play the Tories' game. We want to bring communities together. And the fact is that immigration is a net benefit to this country. Our businesses, our universities, our public services would be worse off without the contribution of migrants. And our NHS in particular would be worse off without the contribution of migrants and the children of migrants. And removing freedom of movement rights already granted would actually be against the law. So Labour thanks all the migrants who have come here, helped to build and run our NHS, including my own mother. They have helped us. They have helped to sustain social care, serve in the public sector, work in industry, and enrich our society. And I'll let the Tories into a secret. The British public increasingly agrees with the Labour Party and our positive view on migration. Back in 2011, most people when polled said that immigration generally had a negative impact. But earlier this year, pollsters found that increasing numbers of people were saying the opposite, and that immigration has generally had an increasingly positive impact. The Tories are selling snake oil on immigration, but the British public are not buying it. The haters are still very noisy, but we all know haters gonna hate. So Britain has changed, Labour's leadership has changed, but it's still the same old rabid Tories, just even more extreme than the last lot. Boris Johnson and his Tories have no vision for our country, only division. Ours will be a great reforming Labour government. We'll welcome refugees, including child refugees. We will proudly uphold the torture ban. And we will treat the victims of torture with humanity, not detentions and deportations. Labour in government will end indefinite immigration detention. And we will limit it to the 28 days MPs were originally promised. And we will close Yarlswood and Brookhouse Detention Centre, and further to that, we will review the entire detention estate. We will fund our police forces properly and work to give our communities genuine security. We will hold public inquiries into historic injustice. We will hold an inquiry into Aubrey. We will hold an inquiry into blacklisting, and we will release all the papers relating to the Shrewsbury 24 trials and the 37 Camel Laird shipyard workers. I am someone who owes everything in life to the labour movement. There was a post-war generation of socialists who campaigned against colonialism. There was the NHS orange juice and cod liver oil. There was my free university education, and above all, the chance to serve as Britain's first black woman MP. We are on the verge of a general election, and I believe that under Jeremy's leadership, with the policies that we're revealing this week and your commitment, we will win. I say to Boris Johnson, bring it on.
Wow. Thank you very much, Diane. I think it's difficult for anyone to beat that. But we now move on to the first of our motions from Women's Conference on rights for migrant women.